He stood at the edge of a river that had stopped flowing. Behind him, an entire nation waited. Before him, fortified cities and giants who had terrified his ancestors 40 years earlier. Moses was dead. The wilderness years were over. And now, one man carried the weight of an impossible promise on his shoulders. His name was Joshua, a former slave, a battlefield commander, and one of only 2 survivors from the old generation. God had spoken 3 words that would define his destiny: be strong and courageous. What followed would become one of the most extraordinary military campaigns in ancient history, and a testament to what happens when faith confronts the impossible. Moses, the great servant of the Lord, was dead. The man who had stood before Pharaoh, who had parted the Red Sea, who had received the law on Mount Sinai, he was gone. For 40 years, he had led Israel through the wilderness. But now his journey was over. The nations stood at the edge of the Jordan River. Across the water lay Canaan, the land God had promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But without Moses, who would lead them? God already had his answer. There was a man named Joshua, the son of Nun. He had been Moses' assistant since his youth. He had led armies and spied out the land. Now his moment had come. The book of Joshua, chapter 1, verses 1 through 2, tells us that after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, "Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel." This was not a suggestion, it was a command. The time for waiting was over. But God did not simply give an order, he gave a promise. In chapter 1, verses 3 through 5, the Lord declared, "Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you." The land was already theirs. Joshua just needed to walk in and claim it. Then God spoke words that would echo throughout Joshua's life. In chapter 1, verses 6 through 7, he said, "Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go." God also gave Joshua the key to success. In chapter 1, verses 8 through 9, he said, "This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous, do not be frightened, and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." The secret was simple: stay close to God's word. If Joshua remained faithful, God would make his path successful. Joshua wasted no time. He had received his orders from God, and now he needed to prepare the people. The book of Joshua, chapter 1, verses 10 through 11, records his first command. Joshua ordered the officers of the people, "Pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, prepare your provisions, for within 3 days you are to pass over this Jordan, to go in to take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess." 3 days. That was all the time they had. After 40 years of wandering, the moment had finally arrived. But Joshua faced a unique situation. The tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh had already received land east of the Jordan. Moses had given it to them on one condition. Their fighting men had to help conquer Canaan before returning to their families. In chapter 1, verses 12 through 15, Joshua reminded them of this promise. He said, "Remember the word that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, 'The Lord your God is providing you a place of rest and will give you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your livestock shall remain in the land that Moses gave you beyond the Jordan. But all the men of valor among you shall pass over armed before your brothers and shall help them, until the Lord gives rest to your brothers as he has to you. And they also take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving them.'" The response of these tribes is recorded in chapter 1, verses 16 through 18. They answered Joshua, "All that you have commanded us we will do, and wherever you send us we will go. Just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your commandment and disobeys your words, whatever you command him, shall be put to death. Only be strong and courageous." They echoed God's own words back to Joshua. They recognized him as their legitimate leader. With every tribe committed, the army was ready to move. Before crossing the Jordan, Joshua decided to gather intelligence. He needed to know what they would face. The Book of Joshua. Chapter 2, verse 1 tells us that Joshua sent 2 men secretly from Shittim as spies, saying, "Go, view the land, especially Jericho." And they went and came into the house of a prostitute whose name was Rahab, and lodged there. But the spies had been noticed. Chapter 2, verses 2 through 3 records that the king of Jericho was told, "Behold, men of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land." The king sent soldiers to Rahab's house with orders to hand them over. Rahab made a different choice. In chapter 2, verses 4 through 6, the woman hid the 2 men and said to the king's messengers, "True, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. And when the gate was about to be closed at dark, the men went out. I do not know where the men went. Pursue them quickly, for you will overtake them." But she had brought them up to the roof and hid them with the stalks of flax. That night, Rahab spoke to the spies. Her words in chapter 2, verses 8 through 11, reveal her faith. She said, "I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destruction. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you, for the Lord your God, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath." This Canaanite woman declared that the Lord is the true God. In chapter 2, verses 12 through 13, she asked, "Now then, please swear to me by the Lord, that as I have dealt kindly with you, you also will deal kindly with my father's house, and give me a sure sign that you will save alive my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death." The spies agreed. They gave her instructions in chapter 2, verses 17 through 20. Tie a scarlet cord in the window and gather her family inside. As long as they stayed in the house, they would be spared. The spies hid in the hills for 3 days, then returned to Joshua. Chapter 2, verses 23 through 24 records their report. "Truly, the Lord has given all the land into our hands, and also all the inhabitants of the land melt away because of us." The 3 days were complete. It was time to cross the Jordan. But chapter 3, verse 15 tells us this was harvest time, and the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of harvest. The river was at flood stage. How would 2 million people cross a flooding river? God had a plan. The book of Joshua, chapter 3, verses 2 through 4, tells us that the officers commanded the people, "As soon as you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from your place and follow it. Yet there shall be a distance between you and it, about 2,000 cubits in length. Do not come near it, in order that you may know the way you shall go, for you have not passed this way before." Joshua told the people in chapter 3, verse 5, "Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you." God spoke to Joshua in chapter 3, verses 7 through 8. "Today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that, as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. And as for you, command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant, when you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan." Joshua announced what would happen in chapter 3, verses 13. "And when the soles of the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from flowing, and the waters coming down from above shall stand in one heap." Then came the moment. Chapter 3, verses 15 through 16 describes it. "As soon as those bearing the ark had come as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were dipped in the brink of the waters coming down from above stood and rose up in a heap very far away, at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan, and those flowing down toward the sea of the Arabah, the salt sea, were completely cut off. And the people passed over opposite Jericho." Chapter 3, verse 17, tells us that the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan. And all Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan. God wanted Israel to remember this day forever. The book of Joshua chapter 4, verses 1 through 3 records that the Lord said to Joshua, "Take 12 men from the people, from each tribe a man, and command them, saying, Take 12 stones from here out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over with you, and lay them down in the place where you lodge tonight." In chapter 4, verses 6 through 7, Joshua explained the purpose. "When your children ask in time to come, 'What do those stones mean to you?' then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever." When the priests left the riverbed, chapter 4, verse 18, tells us that the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks, as before. The people camped at Gilgal. Chapter 5, verse 1, reveals the impact on their enemies. "As soon as all the kings of the Amorites and all the kings of the Canaanites heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of the Jordan for the people of Israel, their hearts melted, and there was no longer any spirit in them. At Gilgal, God commanded circumcision." Chapter 5, verses 4 through 7 explains that all the men born during the wilderness wanderings had not been circumcised. Now before the conquest, God renewed the covenant with his people. After this, chapter 5, verse 9 records that the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you." And so the name of that place is called Gilgal. Chapter 5, verses 10 through 12 tells us they kept the Passover and ate of the produce of the land. And the manna ceased the day after they ate of the produce of the land. They now ate the fruit of Canaan. Then Joshua had an encounter. Chapter 5, verses 13 through 15 describes it. "When Joshua was by Jericho, behold, a man was standing before him with his drawn sword in his hand. And Joshua said to him, 'Are you for us or for our adversaries?' And he said, 'No, but I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come.' And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped. And the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, "Take off your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. The book of Joshua, chapter 6, verse 1, tells us that Jericho was shut up inside and outside because of the people of Israel. None went out and none came in. God gave Joshua unusual instructions. In chapter 6, verses 2 through 5, the Lord said, "See, I have given Jericho into your hand, with its king and mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all the men of war going around the city once. Thus shall you do for 6 days. 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. On the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. And when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, then all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat." Joshua commanded the people in chapter 6, verse 10, "You shall not shout or make your voice heard, neither shall any word go out of your mouth until the day I tell you to shout, then you shall shout." For 6 days they marched around the city once each day in silence. Only the trumpets sounded. On the 7th day, chapter 6, verses 15 through 16, tells us they rose early and marched around the city 7 times. And at the 7th time, when the priests had blown the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." Chapter 6, verse 20, describes the climax. So the people shouted, and the trumpets were blown. As soon as the people heard the sound of the trumpet, the people shouted a great shout, and the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they captured the city. Joshua had given instructions in chapter 6, verses 17 through 19, that everything was devoted to destruction except Rahab and her family, and the precious metals for the Lord's treasury. Chapter 6, verses 22 through 23 records that Joshua said to the 2 spies, "Go into the prostitute's house and bring out from there the woman and all who belong to her, as you swore to her." So the young men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab and her father and mother and brothers and all who belonged to her. Chapter 6, verse 25 tells us that Rahab the prostitute and her father's household and all who belonged to her, Joshua saved alive. And she has lived in Israel to this day, because she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. Chapter 6, verse 27 concludes, "So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was in all the land." After the great victory at Jericho, Israel seemed unstoppable. But something had gone terribly wrong, and no one knew it yet. The book of Joshua, chapter 7, verse 1, reveals the hidden problem. But the people of Israel broke faith in regard to the devoted things. For Achan, the son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of the devoted things. And the anger of the Lord burned against the people of Israel. During the destruction of Jericho, God had commanded that everything be devoted to him. No one was to take any plunder. But a man named Achan had disobeyed. He had secretly taken some of the forbidden items and hidden them in his tent. Because of this one man's sin, God's anger burned against the entire nation. Joshua, unaware of what had happened, sent men to spy out the next target, a city called Ai. Chapter 7, verses 2 through 3 tells us that Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Bethaven, east of Bethel, and said to them, "Go up and spy out the land." And the men went up and spied out Ai. And they returned to Joshua and said to him, "Do not have all the people go up, but let about 2,000 or 3,000 men go up and attack Ai. Do not make the whole people toil up there, for they are few." Ai was a small city. The spies thought it would be an easy victory. Why send the whole army when just a few thousand soldiers could handle it? But they were wrong. Chapter 7, verses 4 through 5 records the disaster. So about 3,000 men went up there from the people. And they fled before the men of Ai, and the men of Ai killed about 36 of their men, and chased them before the gate as far as Shebarim, and struck them at the descent. And the hearts of the people melted and became as water. Israel was defeated. 36 men died. The army that had just conquered Jericho ran away in fear from the men of Ai. The news spread through the camp, and the courage of the people melted like water. Joshua was devastated. Chapter 7, verses 6 through 9 describes his response. Then Joshua tore his clothes and fell to the earth on his face before the ark of the Lord until the evening, he and the elders of Israel, and they put dust on their heads. And Joshua said, Alas, O Lord God, why have you brought this people over the Jordan at all, to give us into the hands of the Amorites, to destroy us? Would that we had been content to dwell beyond the Jordan. O Lord, what can I say when Israel has turned their backs before their enemies? For the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land will hear of it, and will surround us and cut off our name from the earth. And what will you do for your great name? Joshua lay on his face before the ark, crying out to God. He feared that this defeat would destroy Israel's reputation and embolden their enemies. But God's response was direct. Chapter 7, verses 10 through 12, records his words. The Lord said to Joshua, Get up. Why have you fallen on your face? Israel has sinned. They have transgressed my covenant that I commanded them. They have taken some of the devoted things. They have stolen and lied and put them among their own belongings. Therefore the people of Israel cannot stand before their enemies. They turn their backs before their enemies, because they have become devoted for destruction. I will be with you no more, unless you destroy the devoted things from among you. The problem was not military weakness. The problem was sin. Someone had taken what belonged to God, and until that sin was dealt with, Israel could not win any battle. God gave instructions for finding the guilty person. Chapter 7, verses 13 through 15 explains the process. Get up, consecrate the people, and say, Consecrate yourselves for tomorrow. For thus says the Lord God of Israel, There are devoted things in your midst, O Israel. You cannot stand before your enemies until you take away the devoted things from among you. In the morning, therefore, you shall be brought near by your tribes, and the tribe that the Lord takes by lot shall come near by clans, and the clan that the Lord takes shall come near by households, and the household that the Lord takes shall come near man by man. And he who is taken with the devoted things shall be burned with fire, he and all that he has, because he has transgressed the covenant of the Lord, and because he has done an outrageous thing in Israel. The next morning Joshua gathered all Israel. The process of elimination began. Chapter 7, verses 16 through 18 tells us that Joshua rose early in the morning and brought Israel near tribe by tribe. And the tribe of Judah was taken, and he brought near the clans of Judah, and the clan of the Zerahites was taken, and he brought near the clan of the Zerahites man by man, and Zabdi was taken, and he brought near his household man by man, and Ashan the son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah was taken. Step by step the circle narrowed until only one man remained, Achan. Joshua confronted him in chapter 7, verses 19 through 21. Then Joshua said to Achan, My son, give glory to the Lord God of Israel, and give praise to him. And tell me now what you have done. Do not hide it from me. And Achan answered Joshua, Truly I have sinned against the Lord God of Israel, and this is what I did. When I saw among the spoil a beautiful cloak from Shinar, and 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, then I coveted them and took them. And see, they are hidden in the earth inside my tent, with the silver underneath. Achan confessed. He had seen a beautiful cloak, silver, and gold among the plunder. He coveted them. He took them. He hid them under his tent. Joshua sent messengers to verify. Chapter 7, verse 22 through 23 confirms that they ran to the tent. and behold, it was hidden in his tent with the silver underneath. And they took them out of the tent, and brought them to Joshua and to all the people of Israel, and they laid them down before the Lord. The stolen items were spread before the Lord for all to see. The evidence was undeniable. The punishment was severe. Chapter 7, verses 24 through 26, records the judgment. And Joshua and all Israel with him took Achan the son of Zerah, and the silver and the cloak and the bar of gold, and his sons and daughters, and his oxen and donkeys and sheep, and his tent and all that he had. And they brought them up to the valley of Achor. And Joshua said, "Why did you bring trouble on us? The Lord brings trouble on you today." And all Israel stoned him with stones. They burned them with fire and stoned them with stones. And they raised over him a great heap of stones that remains to this day. Then the Lord turned from his burning anger. Therefore to this day the name of that place is called the Valley of Achor. Achan and all he had were destroyed. The place was named Achor, meaning trouble, as a permanent reminder. Only then did God's anger turn away from Israel. With Achan's sin removed, Israel was ready to face Ai again. This time, God would be with them. The book of Joshua, chapter 8, verses 1 through 2, records God's new instructions. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not fear, and do not be dismayed. Take all the fighting men with you, and arise. Go up to Ai. See, I have given into your hand the king of Ai, and his people, his city, and his land. And you shall do to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho and its king. Only its spoil and its livestock you shall take as plunder for yourselves. Lay an ambush against the city behind it. This time the whole army would go, and unlike Jericho, the people could keep the plunder." God also gave Joshua a battle strategy, an ambush. Joshua organized his forces carefully. Chapter 8, verses 3 through 8 describes the plan. So Joshua and all the fighting men arose to go up to Ai, and Joshua chose 30,000 mighty men of valor and sent them out by night. And he commanded them, "Behold, you shall lie in ambush against the city behind it. Do not go very far from the city, but all of you remain ready. And I and all the people who are with me will approach the city. And when they come out against us just as before, we shall flee before them. And they will come out after us until we have drawn them away from the city. For they will say, 'They are fleeing from us, just as before.' So we will flee before them. Then you shall rise up from the ambush and seize the city, for the Lord your God will give it into your hand. And as soon as you have taken the city, you shall set the city on fire. You shall do according to the word of the Lord. See, I have commanded you." The plan was clever. Joshua would pretend to retreat, drawing the soldiers of Ai away from the city. Meanwhile, an ambush force would sneak in and capture the undefended city. Joshua also positioned another group. Chapter 8, verses 12 through 13, adds that he took about 5,000 men and set them in ambush between Bethel and Ai to the west of the city. So they stationed the forces, the main encampment that was north of the city, and its rear guard west of the city. But Joshua spent that night in the valley. Everything was in place. The next morning, Joshua led the main army toward Ai in plain sight. Chapter 8, verses 14 through 17 describes what happened. And as soon as the king of Ai saw this, he and all his people, the men of the city, hurried and went out early to the appointed place toward the Arabah to meet Israel in battle. But he did not know that there was an ambush against him behind the city. And Joshua and all Israel pretended to be beaten before them and fled in the direction of the wilderness. So all the people who were in the city were called together to pursue them. And as they pursued Joshua, they were drawn away from the city. Not a man was left in Ai or Bethel who did not go out after Israel. They left the city open and pursued Israel. The trap was working perfectly. Every soldier in Ai rushed out to chase the fleeing Israelites. The city stood empty and unguarded. Then came God's command. Chapter 8, verses 18 through 19 records the critical moment. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Stretch out the javelin that is in your hand toward Ai, for I will give it into your hand." And Joshua stretched out the javelin that was in his hand toward the city. And the men in ambush rose quickly out of their place, and as soon as he had stretched out his hand, they ran and entered the city and captured it, and they hurried to set the city on fire. Joshua raised his javelin as a signal. The hidden soldiers sprang from their ambush and captured Ai. Smoke rose as the city began to burn. Chapter 8, verses 20 through 22 tells us what happened next. So when the men of Ai looked back, behold, the smoke of the city went up to heaven, and they had no power to flee this way or that, for the people who fled to the wilderness turned back against the pursuers. And when Joshua and all Israel saw that the ambush had captured the city, and that the smoke of the city went up, then they turned back and struck down the men of Ai. And the others came out from the city against them. So they were in the midst of Israel, some on this side and some on that side. And Israel struck them down, until there was left none that survived or escaped. The men of Ai were trapped between two Israelite forces. Not one escaped. The king was captured alive and brought to Joshua. Chapter 8, verses 28 through 29 tells us that Joshua burned Ai and made it forever a heap of ruins, as it is to this day. And he hanged the king of Ai on a tree until evening, and at sunset Joshua commanded, and they took his body down from the tree and threw it at the entrance of the gate of the city, and raised over it a great heap of stones, which stands there to this day. After the victory, Joshua did something important. He led the people to Mount Ebal to worship God. Chapter 8, verses 30 through 31 records this. At that time Joshua built an altar to the Lord, the God of Israel, on Mount Ebal, just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the people of Israel, as it is written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar of uncut stones, upon which no man has wielded an iron tool. And they offered on it burnt offerings to the Lord, and sacrificed peace offerings. Joshua then did what Moses had commanded long ago. Chapter 8, verses 32 through 35, tells us that there, in the presence of the people of Israel, he wrote on the stones a copy of the law of Moses, which he had written. And all Israel, sojourner as well as native-born, with their elders and officers and their judges, stood on opposite sides of the ark before the Levitical priests who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord, half of them in front of Mount Gerizim, and half of them in front of Mount Ebal, just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded at the first, to bless the people of Israel. And afterward he read all the words of the law, the blessing and the curse, according to all that is written in the book of the law. There was not a word of all that Moses commanded that Joshua did not read before all the assembly of Israel, and the women and the little ones, and the sojourners who lived among them. Every word of God's law was read aloud, the blessings and the curses. Everyone heard it, men, women, children, and even foreigners living among them. News of Israel's victory spread throughout Canaan. Most kings prepared for war, but one group chose a different path, deception. The book of Joshua, chapter 9, verses 1 through 2, tells us that as soon as all the kings who were beyond the Jordan, in the hill country, and in the lowland all along the coast of the Great Sea toward Lebanon, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites heard of this, they gathered together as one to fight against Joshua and Israel. The Canaanite kings were forming an alliance to fight Israel together. But the people of Gibeon had a different plan. Chapter 9, verses 3 through 6 describes their scheme. But when the inhabitants of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and to Ai, They on their part acted with cunning, and went and made ready provisions, and took worn-out sacks for their donkeys and wineskins, worn out and torn and mended, with worn-out patched sandals on their feet, and worn-out clothes, and all their provisions were dry and crumbly. And they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal, and said to him and to the men of Israel, "We have come from a distant country, so now make a covenant with us." The Gibeonites dressed themselves to look like weary travelers from a far-off land. Their clothes were worn out, their sandals were falling apart, their bread was dry and moldy, their wineskins were cracked. Everything about them said, "We have been traveling for a very long time." The men of Israel were suspicious. Chapter 9, verses 7 through 8, records their doubt. But the men of Israel said to the Hivites, "Perhaps you live among us. Then how can we make a covenant with you?" They said to Joshua, "We are your servants." And Joshua said to them, "Who are you, and where do you come from?" The Gibeonites had their answer ready. Chapter 9, verses 9 through 11 gives their carefully crafted lie. They said to him, "From a very distant country your servants have come, because of the name of the Lord your God. For we have heard a report of him, and all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon the king of Heshbon, and to Og king of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth. So our elders and all the inhabitants of our country said to us, 'Take provisions in your hand for the journey, and go to meet them, and say to them, "We are your servants. Come now, make a covenant with us."'" Notice what they mentioned: Egypt, Sihon, and Og. These were old news. They deliberately avoided mentioning Jericho and Ai, which had just happened. If they were really from far away, they would not have heard about recent events yet. They showed their evidence in chapter 9, verses 12 through 13. "Here is our bread. It was still warm when we took it from our houses as our food for the journey on the day we set out to come to you. But now, behold, it is dry and crumbly. These wineskins were new when we filled them, and behold, they have burst. And these garments and sandals of ours are worn out from the very long journey." It was convincing. Joshua and the leaders made a critical mistake. Chapter 9, verse 14 reveals it. "So the men took some of their provisions, but did not ask counsel from the Lord. They did not pray. They did not seek God's guidance. They trusted their own judgment." Chapter 9, verse 15 tells us the result. "And Joshua made peace with them, and made a covenant with them, to let them live. And the leaders of the congregation swore to them." Joshua made a binding oath to let the Gibeonites live. The leaders swore before God. 3 days later, the truth came out. Chapter 9, verses 16 through 17, records the discovery. At the end of 3 days after they had made a covenant with them, they heard that they were their neighbors, and that they lived among them. And the people of Israel set out and reached their cities on the 3rd day. Now their cities were Gibeon, Chephirah, Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim. Gibeon was not far away at all. It was nearby, right in the heart of Canaan. The Israelites had been tricked. The people were angry and grumbled against their leaders, but chapter 9, verse 18 through 19 explains why they could not attack. But the people of Israel did not attack them, because the leaders of the congregation had sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. Then all the congregation murmured against the leaders. But all the leaders said to all the congregation, "We have sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel, and now we may not touch them." An oath made before God could not be broken, even if it was made through deception. Israel was bound by their word. The leaders found a solution. Chapter 9, verses 20 through 21 gives the verdict. "This we will do to them. Let them live, lest wrath be upon us, because of the oath that we swore to them." And the leaders said to them, "Let them live." So they became cutters of wood and drawers of water for all the congregation. Just as the leaders had said of them, the Gibeonites would live but as servants. They would cut wood and carry water for Israel. Joshua confronted them in chapter 9, verses 22 through 23. Joshua summoned them, and he said to them, "Why did you deceive us, saying, 'We are very far from you,' when you dwell among us? Now therefore you are cursed, and some of you shall never be anything but servants, cutters of wood, and drawers of water for the house of my God." The Gibeonites explained their reasoning in chapter 9, verses 24 through 25. They answered Joshua, "Because it was told to your servants for a certainty that the Lord your God had commanded his servant Moses to give you all the land and to destroy all the inhabitants of the land from before you. So we feared greatly for our lives because of you and did this thing. And now behold, we are in your hand. Whatever seems good and right in your sight to do to us, do it." They had heard of God's command to destroy all the Canaanites. They feared for their lives. Deception seemed like their only chance of survival. Chapter 9, verses 26 through 27 concludes the matter. So he did this to them and delivered them out of the hand of the people of Israel, and they did not kill them. But Joshua made them that day cutters of wood and drawers of water for the congregation and for the altar of the Lord to this day in the place that he should choose. When the king of Jerusalem heard that Gibeon had made peace with Israel, he was alarmed. Gibeon was a great city with mighty warriors. Now those warriors would not fight against Israel. The book of Joshua, chapter 10, verses 1 through 4, tells us that as soon as Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, heard how Joshua had captured Ai and had devoted it to destruction, doing to Ai and its king as he had done to Jericho and its king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them, he feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, like one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all its men were warriors. So Adonizedek king of Jerusalem sent to Hoham king of Hebron, to Piram king of Jarmuth, to Japhiah king of Lachish, and to Debir king of Eglon, saying, "Come up to me and help me, and let us strike Gibeon, for it has made peace with Joshua and with the people of Israel." 5 Amorite kings formed an alliance. Their target was not Israel, it was Gibeon. They would punish the city for making peace with the enemy. Chapter 10, verse 5 tells us that the 5 kings of the Amorites, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon, gathered their forces and went up with all their armies and encamped against Gibeon and made war against it. The Gibeonites sent an urgent message to Joshua. Chapter 10, verse 6 records their plea. And the men of Gibeon sent to Joshua at the camp in Gilgal, saying, "Do not relax your hand from your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us and help us. For all the kings of the Amorites who dwell in the hill country are gathered against us." Israel had made an oath to protect Gibeon. Now that oath was being tested. Joshua responded immediately. Chapter 10, verses 7 through 8, tells us that Joshua went up from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, and all the mighty men of valor. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not fear them, for I have given them into your hands. Not a man of them shall stand before you." God gave Joshua a promise of victory before the battle even began. Chapter 10, verse 9 describes the attack. So Joshua came upon them suddenly, having marched up all night from Gilgal. Joshua and his army marched all night, a difficult uphill journey from Gilgal to Gibeon. They arrived at dawn and caught the enemy by surprise. What followed was extraordinary. Chapter 10, verses 10 through 11 records the battle. And the Lord threw them into a panic before Israel, who struck them with a great blow at Gibeon, and chased them by the way of the ascent of Beth-horon, and struck them as far as Azekah and Makkedah. And as they fled before Israel, while they were going down the ascent of Beth-horon, the Lord threw down large stones from heaven on them as far as Azekah, and they died. There were more who died because of the hailstones than the sons of Israel killed with the sword. God himself fought for Israel. He sent confusion into the enemy ranks and hurled huge hailstones from the sky. More soldiers died from the hailstones than from Israelite swords. But the day was not long enough to finish the battle. Joshua needed more time. So he did something no one had ever done before. Chapter 10, verses 12 through 14 records this incredible moment. At that time Joshua spoke to the Lord in the day when the Lord gave the Amorites over to the sons of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, "Sun, stand still at Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Aijalon." And the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, until the nation took vengeance on their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Jashar? The sun stopped in the midst of heaven and did not hurry to set for about a whole day. There has been no day like it before or since, when the Lord heeded the voice of a man, for the Lord was fighting for Israel. The sun stopped moving. The day was extended. Joshua had time to complete the victory. There had never been a day like it before, and there has never been one since. The 5 kings fled and hid in a cave at Makkedah. Chapter 10, verses 16 through 18, tells us that these 5 kings fled and hid themselves in the cave at Makkedah. And it was told to Joshua, "The 5 kings have been found hidden in the cave at Makkedah." And Joshua said, "Roll large stones against the mouth of the cave and set men by it to guard them." Joshua sealed them in temporarily while he pursued the rest of the army. After the battle, he dealt with the kings. Chapter 10, verses 22 through 27, describes their fate. Then Joshua said, "Open the mouth of the cave and bring those 5 kings out to me from the cave." And they did so, and brought those 5 kings out to him from the cave: the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon. And when they brought those kings out to Joshua, Joshua summoned all the men of Israel and said to the chiefs of the men of war who had gone with him, "Come near, put your feet on the necks of these kings." Then they came near and put their feet on their necks. And Joshua said to them, "Do not be afraid or dismayed. Be strong and courageous. For thus the Lord will do to all your enemies against whom you fight." And afterward Joshua struck them and put them to death, and he hanged them on 5 trees. Joshua then continued his campaign through the south. Chapter 10, verses 28 through 42, summarizes the conquest. He captured Makkedah, Libnah, Lachish, Gezer, Eglon, Hebron, and Debir. Every city was defeated. Every king was killed. The entire southern region of Canaan fell to Israel. Chapter 10, verses 40 through 42, gives the summary. So Joshua struck the whole land, the hill country, and the Negeb, and the lowland, and the slopes, and all their kings. He left none remaining, but devoted to destruction all that breathed, just as the Lord God of Israel commanded. And Joshua struck them from Kadesh Barnea as far as Gaza, and all the country of Goshen as far as Gibeon. And Joshua captured all these kings and their land at one time, because the Lord God of Israel fought for Israel. The conquest of the south alarmed the kings of the north. A powerful ruler named Jabin, king of Hazor, decided to act. The book of Joshua, chapter 11, verses 1 through 3, tells us that when Jabin, king of Hazor, heard of this, he sent to Jobab, king of Madon, and to the king of Shimron, and to the king of Akshaph, and to the kings who were in the northern hill country, and in the Arabah south of Chinneroth, and in the lowland, and in Naphoth Dor on the west, to the Canaanites in the east and the west, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, and the Jebusites in the hill country, and the Hivites under Hermon in the land of Mizpah. Jabin assembled the largest coalition yet. Kings from across the northern territories united against Israel. Chapter 11, verse 4 describes the size of this army. "And they came out with all their troops, a great horde in number, like the sand that is on the seashore, with very many horses and chariots." This was a massive force. countless soldiers, horses and chariots, weapons Israel did not have. From a human perspective, Israel was badly outmatched. Chapter 11, verse 5 tells us that all these kings joined their forces and came and encamped together at the waters of Merom to fight against Israel. The armies gathered at the waters of Merom, preparing for battle. But God spoke to Joshua with reassurance. Chapter 11, verse 6 records his words, "And the Lord said to Joshua, 'Do not be afraid of them, for tomorrow at this time I will give over all of them, slain to Israel. You shall hamstring their horses and burn their chariots with fire.'" God promised complete victory. The horses and chariots that seemed so threatening would be destroyed. Joshua obeyed immediately. Chapter 11, verses 7 through 8 describes the attack. "So Joshua and all his warriors came suddenly against them by the waters of Merom and fell upon them. And the Lord gave them into the hand of Israel, who struck them and chased them as far as Great Sidon and Misrephoth-maim, and eastward as far as the valley of Mizpeh. And they struck them until he left none remaining." The surprise attack was devastating. The massive northern coalition was routed. Israel chased them in every direction, north, west, and east, until none remained. Chapter 11, verse 9 tells us that Joshua did to them just as the Lord said to him. He hamstrung their horses and burned their chariots with fire. The horses were hamstrung, making them useless for war. The chariots were burned. Israel would trust in God, not in military technology. Then Joshua turned to Hazor itself. Chapter 11, verses 10 through 11, records its destruction. "And Joshua turned back at that time and captured Hazor and struck its king with the sword. For Hazor formerly was the head of all those kingdoms. And they struck with the sword all who were in it, devoting them to destruction. There was none left that breathed, and he burned Hazor with fire. Hazor had been the most powerful city in Canaan, the head of all those kingdoms. Now it was ashes." Chapter 11, verses 12 through 15 summarizes Joshua's complete obedience. "And all the cities of those kings and all their kings Joshua captured and struck them with the edge of the sword, devoting them to destruction, just as Moses the servant of the Lord had commanded. But none of the cities that stood on mounds did Israel burn, except Hazor alone that Joshua burned. And all the spoil of these cities and the livestock the people of Israel took for their plunder. But every person they struck with the edge of the sword until they had destroyed them, and they did not leave any who breathed. Just as the Lord had commanded Moses his servant, so Moses commanded Joshua, and so Joshua did. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord had commanded Moses. Joshua followed every instruction God had given to Moses. He left nothing undone." Chapter 11, verses 16 through 20 gives an overview of the total conquest. "So Joshua took all that land, the hill country, and all the Negeb, and all the land of Goshen, and the lowland, and the Arabah, and the hill country of Israel and its lowland, from Mount Halak, which rises toward Seir, as far as Baal-gad, in the valley of Lebanon below Mount Hermon. And he captured all their kings, and struck them and put them to death. Joshua made war a long time with all those kings. There was not a city that made peace with the people of Israel, except the Hivites, the inhabitants of Gibeon. They took them all in battle. For it was the Lord's doing to harden their hearts, that they should come against Israel in battle, in order that they should be devoted to destruction, and should receive no mercy, but be destroyed, just as the Lord commanded Moses." The conquest was complete. From the southern desert to the northern mountains, the land belonged to Israel. Chapter 11, verses 23 concludes, "So Joshua took the whole land according to all that the Lord had spoken to Moses. And Joshua gave it for an inheritance to Israel according to their tribal allotments, and the land had rest from war." The book of Joshua, chapter 12, provides a complete record of all the kings defeated during the conquest. It begins with the victories Moses had won east of the Jordan before his death. Chapter 12, verses 1 through 2 introduces this section. Now these are the kings of the land whom the people of Israel defeated and took possession of their land beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise, from the valley of the Arnon to Mount Hermon, with all the Arabah eastward, Sihon, king of the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon and ruled from Aroer, which is on the edge of the valley of the Arnon, and from the middle of the valley as far as the river Jabbok, the boundary of the Ammonites, that is, half of Gilead. Chapter 12, verses 4 through 5 continues with the second king east of the Jordan. And Og king of Bashan, one of the remnant of the Rephaim, who lived at Ashtaroth and at Edrei, and ruled over Mount Hermon and Salekah and all Bashan, to the boundary of the Geshurites and the Maccathites, and over half of Gilead, to the boundary of Sihon, king of Heshbon. Chapter 12, verse 6 summarizes, Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the people of Israel defeated them. And Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave their land for a possession to the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh. These were the territories given to the tribes who settled east of the Jordan. Then the chapter turns to Joshua's conquests west of the Jordan. Chapter 12, verse 7 introduces this list. And these are the kings of the land whom Joshua and the people of Israel defeated on the west side of the Jordan, from Baalgad in the valley of Lebanon to Mount Halak, that rises towards Seir. And Joshua gave their land to the tribes of Israel as a possession according to their allotments. Chapter 12, verse 8 describes the territories. In the hill country, in the lowland, in the Arabah, in the slopes, in the wilderness, and in the Negeb, the land of the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Then comes the list of conquered kings. Chapter 12, verses 9 through 24 names them all. The king of Jericho, the king of Ai, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, the king of Eglon, the king of Gezer, the king of Debir, the king of Gader, the king of Hormah, the king of Arad, the king of Libnah, the king of Adullam, the king of Makkedah, the king of Bethel, the king of Tappuah, the king of Hepher, the king of Aphek, the king of Lasharon, the king of Madon, the king of Hazor, the king of Shimron Meron, the king of Akshaph, the king of Taanach, the king of Megiddo, the king of Kedesh, the king of Jokneam in Carmel, the king of Dor in Naphath Dor, the king of Goyim in Galilee, the king of Tirzah. Chapter 12, verse 24 gives the final count. 31 kings in all, 31 kings defeated, 31 cities conquered. The land that God had promised to Abraham hundreds of years earlier was now in Israel's hands. The wars had been long. Joshua had led Israel through battle after battle, but now something had changed. Joshua was no longer a young man. The book of Joshua, chapter 13, verse 1, tells us that Joshua was old and advanced in years, and the Lord said to him, "You are old and advanced in years, and there remains yet very much land to possess." God acknowledged that Joshua had grown old. But he also pointed out that the work was not finished. There were still territories unconquered. Chapter 13, verses 2 through 6 lists these areas, the regions of the Philistines, the Geshurites, the Sidonians, and various Canaanite groups. 5 Philistine cities remained: Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron. Land in Lebanon and along the coast was still occupied by enemies. But God gave Joshua a command. Even though the conquest was incomplete, it was time to divide the land. Chapter 13, verse 6 records God's words, "I myself will drive them out from before the people of Israel. Only allot the land to Israel for an inheritance, as I have commanded you." Chapter 13, verse 7 gives the instruction, "Now therefore divide this land for an inheritance to the 9 tribes and half the tribe of Manasseh." 9.5 tribes would receive land west of the Jordan. The other 2.5 tribes had already received their inheritance from Moses on the eastern side. Chapter 13. Verses 15 through 23 describes the territory of Reuben, including cities like Heshbon and the tableland of Medeba. Chapter 13, verses 24 through 28 outlines the inheritance of Gad, including Jazer and all the cities of Gilead. Chapter 13, verses 29 through 31 records the half-tribe of Manasseh's portion east of the Jordan. One tribe received no land at all. Chapter 13, verse 33 explains, "But to the tribe of Levi Moses gave no inheritance. The Lord God of Israel is their inheritance, just as he said to them." The Levites were set apart for service to God. They would serve at the tabernacle and receive provision from the offerings. The Lord himself was their inheritance. Now the attention turned to the land west of the Jordan. The division would take place at Gilgal. The book of Joshua, chapter 14, verses 1 through 2, introduces this section. These are the inheritances that the people of Israel received in the land of Canaan, which Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun and the heads of the fathers' houses of the tribes of the people of Israel gave them to inherit. Their inheritance was by lot, just as the Lord had commanded. Before the lots were cast, one man stepped forward. His name was Caleb, and he had been waiting 45 years for this moment. Chapter 14, verses 6 through 9, records his appeal. Caleb the son of Jephunneh said to Joshua, "You know what the Lord said to Moses the man of God in Kadesh Barnea concerning you and me. I was 40 years old when Moses the servant of the Lord sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought him word again, as it was in my heart. But my brothers who went up with me made the heart of the people melt. Yet I wholly followed the Lord my God. And Moses swore on that day, saying, Surely the land on which your foot has trodden shall be an inheritance for you and your children forever, because you have wholly followed the Lord my God." Caleb and Joshua had been the only faithful spies. Moses had promised Caleb would receive the land he had explored. Chapter 14, verses 10 through 12 continues. "And now, behold, the Lord has kept me alive, just as he said, these 45 years since the time that the Lord spoke this word to Moses, while Israel walked in the wilderness. And now, behold, I am this day 85 years old. I am still as strong today as I was in the day that Moses sent me. My strength now is as my strength was then, for war and for going and coming. So now give me this hill country of which the Lord spoke on that day, for you heard on that day how the Anakim were there, with great fortified cities. It may be that the Lord will be with me, and I shall drive them out, just as the Lord said." Caleb was 85, but still strong. He wanted the hill country where the giants lived, the very enemies who had terrified the other spies. Chapter 14, verses 13 through 14, records Joshua's response. Then Joshua blessed him, and he gave Hebron to Caleb the son of Jephunneh for an inheritance. Therefore Hebron became the inheritance of Caleb, the son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, to this day, because he wholly followed the Lord, the God of Israel. Joshua granted his old friend's request. Hebron, where Abraham had lived and the patriarchs were buried, belonged to faithful Caleb. Judah was the largest tribe. They were the first to receive their inheritance by lot. The book of Joshua, chapter 15, verses 1 through 4, describes Judah's southern boundary, stretching from the Dead Sea to the Mediterranean, following the wilderness of Zin and the brook of Egypt. Chapter 15, verse 5, defines the eastern boundary as the Salt Sea. Chapter 15, verses 5 through 11, traces the northern boundary in detail, running through the valley of Hinnom south of Jerusalem to the Mediterranean. Chapter 15, verse 12, identifies the western boundary as the Great Sea. Judah's territory was enormous, from the Dead Sea to the Mediterranean, from the southern wilderness to the hills near Jerusalem. Within this territory, Caleb received Hebron. Chapter 15, verses 13 through 14 tells us that Caleb drove out from there the three sons of Anak, Sheshai and Ahiman, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak. Chapter 15, Verses 15 through 17 describes what followed. Caleb went against Debir and said, "Whoever strikes Kiriath Sepher and captures it, to him will I give Achsah my daughter as wife." And Othniel the son of Kenaz, the brother of Caleb, captured it, and he gave him Achsah his daughter as wife. Chapter 15, verses 18 through 19 records a charming exchange. When Achsah came to Othniel, she urged him to ask her father for a field. She dismounted from her donkey, and Caleb said, "What do you want?" She said, "Give me a blessing. Since you have given me the land of the Negeb, give me also springs of water." And he gave her the upper springs and the lower springs. Bold like her father, Achsah asked for land with water, and Caleb granted it. The rest of chapter 15 lists Judah's many cities in the Negeb, the lowland, the hill country, and the wilderness. However, chapter 15, verse 63, notes a failure. But the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the people of Judah, could not drive out, so the Jebusites dwell with the people of Judah at Jerusalem to this day. Jerusalem remained unconquered until the time of King David. After Judah, the descendants of Joseph received their inheritance. Joseph's two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, each became a tribe. The book of Joshua, chapter 16, verses 1 through 4, describes the general boundaries for Joseph's descendants, stretching from Jericho through the hill country to the sea. This was prime land in the heart of Canaan. Chapter 16, verses 5 through 8, details Ephraim's territory in the southern portion, from Jericho to the Mediterranean. But chapter 16, verse 10, records a failure. However, they did not drive out the Canaanites who lived in Gaza, so the Canaanites have lived in the midst of Ephraim to this day, but have been made to do forced labor. Chapter 17, verses 1 through 6, describes Manasseh's inheritance. The chapter notes something unusual. Zelophehad had no sons, only daughters. Chapter 17, verse 4, tells us they approached Joshua, saying, "The Lord commanded Moses to give us an inheritance along with our brothers." So according to the mouth of the Lord, he gave them an inheritance among the brothers of their father. God had commanded that daughters could inherit when there were no sons. Joshua honored this. Chapter 17, verses 7 through 11 outlines Manasseh's boundaries, including important cities like Beth-shean, Tanach, and Megiddo. Again, chapter 17, verse 12 reports incomplete conquest, yet the people of Manasseh could not take possession of those cities, but the Canaanites persisted in dwelling in that land. The people of Joseph complained to Joshua. Chapter 17, verses 14 through 15 records their words. "Why have you given me but one lot and one portion as an inheritance, although I am a numerous people?" Joshua answered, "If you are a numerous people, go up by yourselves to the forest, and there clear ground for yourselves." They protested that the Canaanites had iron chariots. Chapter 17, verses 17 through 18 gives Joshua's response. "You are a numerous people and have great power. You shall not have one allotment only, but the hill country shall be yours. For though it is a forest, you shall clear it and possess it to its farthest borders. For you shall drive out the Canaanites, though they have chariots of iron, and though they are strong." 3 tribes had received their inheritance, but 7 tribes still waited, and they seemed in no hurry. The book of Joshua, chapter 18, verse 1, marks an important transition. Then the whole congregation of the people of Israel assembled at Shiloh and set up the tent of meeting there. The land lay subdued before them. The tabernacle moved from Gilgal to Shiloh, which would be Israel's religious center for years. Chapter 18, verses 2 through 3, reveals the problem. There remained among the people of Israel 7 tribes whose inheritance had not yet been apportioned. So Joshua said to the people of Israel, "How long will you put off going in to take possession of the land which the Lord, the God of your fathers, has given you?" Joshua rebuked them for their delay. Chapter 18, verses 4 through 7 outlines his plan. Provide 3 men from each tribe, and I will send them out, that they may set out and go up and down the land. They shall write a description of it with a view to their inheritances, and then come to me. They shall divide it into 7 portions. 21 men would survey the land, divide it into 7 portions, and bring the description to Joshua. Then lots would determine which tribe received which portion. Chapter 18, verses 8 through 10 describes the result. So the men went and passed up and down in the land, and wrote in a book a description of it by towns in 7 divisions. Then they came to Joshua to the camp at Shiloh, and Joshua cast lots for them in Shiloh before the Lord. And there Joshua apportioned the land to the people of Israel, to each his portion. The survey was complete. The lots were cast. The first lot fell to Benjamin. They would receive land between the 2 most powerful tribes. The book of Joshua. Chapter 18, verse 11 tells us the territory allotted to them fell between the people of Judah and the people of Joseph. This was strategic territory, connecting the northern and southern regions. Chapter 18, verses 12 through 13 describes the northern boundary, running from the Jordan past Jericho through the hill country to Beth Horon. Chapter 18, verses 14 through 19 traces the remaining boundaries. The western border touched Judah. The southern border ran through the valley of Hinnom, past the Jebusite city to the Dead Sea. The eastern border was the Jordan River. Chapter 18, verse 20 confirms, the Jordan forms its boundary on the eastern side. This is the inheritance of the people of Benjamin, according to their clans, boundary by boundary all around. Chapter 18, verses 21 through 24 list 12 cities in the eastern portion, including Jericho and Bethel. Chapter 18, verses 25 through 28 lists 14 cities in the western portion: Gibeon, Ramah, Beeroth, Mizpeh, Chephirah, Modzah, Rechem, Irpeel, Taralah, Zelah, Haleph, Jebus, that is Jerusalem, Gibeah, and Kiriath Jearim, 14 cities with their villages. This is the inheritance of the people of Benjamin, according to their clans. Benjamin's territory was established. Though one of the smallest tribes, their land included Gibeon and Jebus, the future Jerusalem. From this tribe would come Israel's first king, Saul. After Benjamin received their land, 6 tribes still waited. The lots continued to be cast at Shiloh before the Lord. The book of Joshua, chapter 19, verses 1 through 9, describes the second lot. The second lot came out for Simeon, for the tribe of the people of Simeon, according to their clans, and their inheritance was in the midst of the inheritance of the people of Judah. Simeon's territory was unique. Instead of having their own region, they received cities within Judah's territory, 17 towns, including Beersheba and Molada. Chapter 19, verse 9, explains that the portion of the people of Judah was too large for them, so the people of Simeon obtained an inheritance in the midst of their inheritance. The third lot fell to Zebulun. Chapter 19, verses 10 through 16, describes their territory in the north, including 12 cities stretching from Sarid to Dabarath. The fourth lot went to Issachar. Chapter 19, verses 17 through 23 outlines their inheritance. 16 cities, including Jezreel and Shunem in the Fertile Valley region. The fifth lot fell to Asher. Chapter 19, verses 24 through 31 describes their coastal territory in the northwest, with 22 cities stretching to Tyre and the Mediterranean. The sixth lot went to Naphtali. Chapter 19, verses 32 through 39 records their inheritance in the northern highlands, 19 fortified cities, including Kadesh and Hazor. The seventh lot fell to Dan. Chapter 19, verses 40 through 48 describes their territory, but Dan faced a problem. Chapter 19, verse 47 tells us the territory of the people of Dan was lost to them. So the people of Dan went up and fought against Leshem, and after capturing it and striking it with the sword, they took possession of it and settled in it. calling Leshem Dan after the name of Dan, their ancestor. The Danites could not hold their original territory, so they migrated north and captured Leshem. Chapter 19, verses 49 through 50 records the final inheritance. When they had finished distributing the several territories of the land as inheritances, the people of Israel gave an inheritance among them to Joshua, the son of Nun. By command of the Lord, they gave him the city that he asked, Timnath-Serah in the hill country of Ephraim. And he rebuilt the city and settled in it. Joshua, who had led Israel through the conquest, was the last to receive his portion. Chapter 19, verse 51 concludes, These are the inheritances that Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun, and the heads of the fathers' houses of the tribes of the people of Israel, distributed by lot at Shiloh before the Lord, at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So they finished dividing the land. With the land divided, God commanded Joshua to establish special cities for protection. The book of Joshua, chapter 20, verses 1 through 3, introduces this command. Then the Lord said to Joshua, Say to the people of Israel, appoint the cities of refuge, of which I spoke to you through Moses, that the manslayer who strikes any person without intent or unknowingly may flee there. They shall be for you a refuge from the avenger of blood. In Israel, if someone killed another person, a relative called the avenger of blood could pursue and kill the murderer. But what if the death was an accident? God provided a solution. Chapter 20, verses 4 through 6, explains the process. He shall flee to one of these cities and shall stand at the entrance of the gate of the city and explain his case to the elders of that city. Then they shall take him into the city and give him a place, and he shall remain with them. And if the avenger of blood pursues him, they shall not give up the manslayer into his hand, because he struck his neighbor unknowingly and did not hate him in the past. And he shall remain in that city until he has stood before the congregation for judgment, until the death of him who is high priest at the time. The person could stay safely in the city until the high priest died. Then they were free to return home. Chapter 20, verses 7 through 8 lists the 6 cities. So they set apart Kadesh in Galilee in the hill country of Naphtali, and Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim, and Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the hill country of Judah. And beyond the Jordan east of Jericho, they appointed Bezer in the wilderness on the tableland, from the tribe of Reuben, and Ramoth in Gilead, from the tribe of Gad, and Golan in Bashan, from the tribe of Manasseh. 3 cities west of the Jordan, 3 cities east. No matter where someone lived, a city of refuge was within reach. Chapter 20, verse 9 adds that these were the cities designated for all the people of Israel and for the stranger sojourning among them, that anyone who killed a person without intent could flee there. The tribe of Levi had no territory of their own, but they needed places to live. The book of Joshua, chapter 21, verses 1 through 3 records their request. Then the heads of the fathers' houses of the Levites came to Eleazar the priest and to Joshua the son of Nun, and said, The Lord commanded through Moses that we be given cities to dwell in, along with their pasture lands for our livestock. So by command of the Lord, the people of Israel gave to the Levites the following cities and pasture lands out of their inheritance. Chapter 21, verses 4 through 8, describes the distribution. The descendants of Aaron received 13 cities from Judah, Simeon, and Benjamin. The rest of the Kohathites received 10 cities from Ephraim, Dan, and half Manasseh. The Gershonites received 13 cities from Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, and half Manasseh. The Merarites received 12 cities from Reuben, Gad, and Zebulun. In total, 48 cities were given to the Levites throughout Israel. Chapter 21, verses 43 through 45 gives a powerful summary. Thus the Lord gave to Israel all the land that he swore to give to their fathers, and they took possession of it, and they settled there. And the Lord gave them rest on every side, just as he had sworn to their fathers. Not one of all their enemies had withstood them, for the Lord had given all their enemies into their hands. Not one word of all the good promises that the Lord had made to the house of Israel had failed. All came to pass. Every promise God made had been fulfilled. The land was theirs. Not one word had failed. The conquest was complete. Now it was time for the eastern tribes to go home. The Book of Joshua. Chapter 22, verses 1 through 4 records Joshua's farewell to them. Then Joshua summoned the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh, and said to them, "You have kept all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, and have obeyed my voice in all that I have commanded you. You have not forsaken your brothers these many days, down to this day. And now the Lord your God has given rest to your brothers, as he promised them. Therefore turn and go to your tents in the land where your possession lies." These tribes had kept their promise. Now they could return to their families. But then something happened that nearly started a civil war. Chapter 22, verses 10 through 11, tells us that when they came to the region of the Jordan, the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh built there an altar by the Jordan, an altar of imposing size. When the western tribes heard about it, they were alarmed. Building another altar seemed like rebellion against God. Chapter 22, verse 12 tells us the whole assembly of the people of Israel gathered at Shiloh to make war against them. Before attacking, they sent a delegation led by Phinehas, the priest. Chapter 22, verses 15 through 16 records their accusation. "Thus says the whole congregation of the Lord, what is this breach of faith that you have committed against the God of Israel in turning away this day from following the Lord by building yourselves an altar this day in rebellion against the Lord?" But the eastern tribes explained themselves. Chapter 22, verses 22 through 27 records their response. "The mighty one, God the Lord, he knows, and let Israel itself know. If it was in rebellion or in breach of faith against the Lord, do not spare us today. No, but we did it from fear that in time to come your children might say to our children, 'What have you to do with the Lord, the God of Israel? For the Lord has made the Jordan a boundary between us and you. You have no portion in the Lord.' Therefore we said, 'Let us now build an altar not for burnt offering, nor for sacrifice, but to be a witness between us and you and between our generations after us.'" They had not built the altar for sacrifice. They built it as a witness, a reminder that the eastern tribes also belonged to the Lord. Chapter 22, verses 30 through 31 records the response. "When Phinehas the priest and the chiefs heard the words, it was good in their eyes. And Phinehas said, 'Today we know that the Lord is in our midst, because you have not committed this breach of faith against the Lord.'" The civil war was averted. Chapter 22, verse 34 concludes that the people of Reuben and Gad called the altar witness. "For," they said, "it is a witness between us that the Lord is God." Many years passed. Israel lived in peace, but Joshua knew his time was ending. The book of Joshua, chapter 23, verse 1, sets the scene. A long time afterward, when the Lord had given rest to Israel from all their surrounding enemies, and Joshua was old and well advanced in years. Chapter 23, verse 2 tells us Joshua summoned all Israel, its elders and heads, its judges and officers. Chapter 23, verses 3 through 5 records his words. "You have seen all that the Lord your God has done to all these nations for your sake, for it is the Lord your God who has fought for you. Behold, I have allotted to you as an inheritance for your tribes those nations that remain, along with all the nations that I have already cut off. The Lord your God will push them back before you and drive them out of your sight." Joshua reminded them that every victory came from the Lord. Chapter 23, verses 6 through 8 gives the key command. Therefore, be very strong to keep and to do all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, turning aside from it neither to the right hand nor to the left, that you may not mix with these nations remaining among you, or make mention of the names of their gods, or swear by them, or serve them, or bow down to them. But you shall cling to the Lord your God, just as you have done to this day. Obey God's law. Do not follow other gods. Cling to the Lord. Chapter 23, verses 11 through 13, gives a warning. Be very careful, therefore, to love the Lord your God. For if you turn back and cling to the remnant of these nations remaining among you, and make marriages with them, so that you associate with them and they with you, know for certain that the Lord your God will no longer drive out these nations before you, but they shall be a snare and a trap for you, a whip on your sides and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from off this good land. If Israel intermarried with the Canaanites and followed their gods, disaster would follow. Chapter 23, verses 15 through 16 concludes, But just as all the good things that the Lord your God promised concerning you have been fulfilled for you, so the Lord will bring upon you all the evil things, until he has destroyed you from off this good land that the Lord your God has given you, if you transgress the covenant of the Lord your God. God keeps his promises, both blessings and curses. Joshua called one final assembly, all the people, not just the leaders. The book of Joshua, chapter 24, verses 1 through 2, tells us Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem, and they presented themselves before God. And Joshua said to all the people, Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel. Joshua recounted Israel's entire history, from Abraham beyond the Euphrates, through Egypt, the Exodus, the wilderness, and the conquest. Chapter 24, verses 12 through 13 summarizes, And you went over the Jordan and came to Jericho, and I gave them into your hand. I gave you a land on which you had not labored, and cities that you had not built, and you dwell in them. You eat the fruit of vineyards and olive orchards that you did not plant. Everything Israel had came from God. Then came the challenge. Chapter 24, verses 14 through 15 records Joshua's famous words. Now therefore fear the Lord, and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. The people responded in chapter 24, verses 16 through 18. Far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods, for it is the Lord our God who brought us and our fathers up from the land of Egypt. Therefore we also will serve the Lord, for he is our God. Joshua tested them. Chapter 24, verses 19 through 20 warns them, You are not able to serve the Lord, for he is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions or your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, then he will turn and do you harm. Chapter 24, verses 21 through 24, records the final exchange. The people said, No, but we will serve the Lord. Then Joshua said, You are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen the Lord. And they said, We are witnesses. And the people said, The Lord our God we will serve, and his voice we will obey. Chapter 24, verse 25 tells us Joshua made a covenant with the people that day at Shechem. He set up a large stone as a witness. Chapter 24, verses 29 through 30 records Joshua's death. After these things, Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died, being 110 years old. And they buried him in his own inheritance at Timnath-Serah, which is in the hill country of Ephraim. Chapter 24, verse 31 gives a final note. Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua and had known all the work that the Lord did for Israel. Chapter 24, verse 32, adds that the bones of Joseph, which the people of Israel brought up from Egypt, they buried at Shechem. Joseph's bones, carried for decades, were finally laid to rest in the Promised Land. Chapter 24, verse 33 concludes the book. And Eleazar the son of Aaron died, and they buried him at Gibeah, the town of Phinehas his son, which had been given him in the hill country of Ephraim. The story of Joshua reminds us that God keeps every promise he makes, from the walls of Jericho falling to the ground, to the sun standing still in the sky, to an entire nation receiving their inheritance. Not one word failed. Joshua started as a servant and became a leader. He faced giants, fortified cities, and powerful armies, but he never faced them alone. The same God who parted the Jordan River fought every battle beside him. And now, at the end of his life, Joshua left Israel with a choice that still echoes today. Choose this day whom you will serve. If this story has touched your heart, take a moment to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it today. Leave a comment telling us which part of Joshua's journey impacted you the most. Thank you for watching, and may God bless you until we meet again.